You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron, live with Ethan Hristodoulou.
What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Greeks Gridiron. I'm Ethan Hristodoulou, and hello to my Chicago Bears fans specifically. I'm kicking off a new series starting with you, the Chicago Bears, as we preview the offseason for the 18 teams that are currently eliminated from the playoffs. With the NFL regular season being wrapped up, we have teams in limbo now, just kind of waiting for the rest of the season to finish up. But I think it's a good opportunity to now sit down and look at these teams as we work our way through the playoffs and talk about things that they need to be prioritizing, things that they need to be looking at going into free agency and in this year's upcoming draft. So, Bears fans, take a seat and let's talk a little bit of your Chicago Bears and what I would like to see them focus on going into this year's offseason. So, beginning with a couple of priority things that I have listed off here, my two main points have to deal with the offensive side of the ball, and that being Justin Fields and running back David Montgomery. We'll start with Justin Fields, though, and for me, this one is plain and simple. You need to go all in on Justin Fields this offseason. I'm talking finding him protection on the offensive line and getting him another playmaker, whether it's a wide receiver or a tight end, somebody that is a legitimate impact guy. And no disrespect to Cole Kmet, I'm a big fan of him. I think he's a really solid tight end, but he is not a guy that's going to light up a defense a la like a Travis Kelce type of guy, a George Kittle type of guy. I like Cole Kmet. I think he's a complimentary piece to this offense, but I would like to see, if they did target a tight end, a guy that is going to be a game changer in a system that is very run heavy and I think could really help the offense do what they want to do, but also open up the passing game some more. Again, I like Cole Kmet. Do I think he's the long-term answer at tight end? Maybe, maybe not. I'd actually really like to hear what you Bears fans think about that. You obviously would know him a little bit better than I do. I'm constantly looking at the entire NFL, so I try to zero in on things when I can, but I'm not necessarily sold on Cole Kmet as like being the guy at tight end. He obviously offers a good, he's a good piece for now, but you're going to tell me you wouldn't want a guy like George Kittle or Travis Kelce. Obviously, there's not a lot of those laying around everywhere, but if you can find a guy that's a game-changing talent like that, you definitely want to try to bring him in. Now, the other thing that I want to focus here on is David Montgomery, the running back. He's gone through 4 years now in the NFL. He has been a really solid guy, I would say, in the backfield for Chicago. He's been pretty available for the most part of his career. He played in 16 games his rookie year, 15 in 2020. He missed 3 games in 2021, 4 games because there's 17 at that point. And then he played in 16 games this year. Now, obviously, his numbers not quite as explosive as they were maybe a couple of years ago, and I could say that partially that I would say more so mainly than anything, has to do with just the fact that Justin Fields does eat up a lot of the yardage himself. He was a 1,000-yard rusher this season. He had 1,143 yards altogether when the season was all finished up here. So I would say that this is a guy that I would maybe consider trying to bring back on like a solid, and hopefully he'd be willing to take team-friendly deal. I like him as a piece. I think he's a good, solid guy to be able to build your running game around. You get him another complimentary running back, and maybe you already have that with somebody else that's on the roster. But I would really just like to see him stick around. It's one less thing you really have to worry about, and it's somebody that's been there so far for the duration of Justin Fields' career that he's comfortable with lining up behind him. Now, those are my two kind of like priority things. Just bring back David Montgomery, and then obviously, like I said, go all in on Justin Fields. Now, how do we get there? Starting with free agency, this team is going to have $119 million in cap space going into free agency. That is so much money to play with, and there are a lot of holes to fill on this Chicago Bears team. For me, when I look at free agency and I look at the Bears, the two positions that I would really like to see them just focus on, are not even positions because they're more position groups than anything else, is focusing on the offensive and defensive lines. Just look at the trenches. It's not necessarily going to be like a spectacular wide receiver class by any means. Obviously, someone could get released here and there because of a cap casualty type of thing, but it's not going to necessarily be a spectacular group of wide receivers. And I don't really know if there's any tight ends in the market that are going to really blow your top off that'll say we should replace Cole Kmet or fit in with Cole Kmet, this guy. I would like to see them focus more on the offensive and defensive lines. Whether you're going after a premier left tackle or you're going after a guy that's going to rush the edges and be an effective rusher, there's some decent names that are going to be out there. And maybe it's not your long-term answer, but it's a guy that's going to solidify that front seven. And then on the opposite side, if it's offensive line, you take the best offensive lineman that is available in this free agency class. That's kind of how I look at it for the Chicago Bears. Yeah, you may have to overpay a little bit, but Justin Fields, I believe, is a proven commodity if he just had some more time in the pocket. Things have gotten really crazy over there in Chicago behind that offensive line, and I would really just like to see them go all in on protecting Justin Fields. Again, focus on the O-line, spend that extra money, hell, maybe get 2 high-priced offensive linemen. You have $119 million to play with. You look at like what the Kansas City Chiefs did after they got blown out in the Super Bowl. Then you look at what the Bengals did just last season. Both those teams spent a lot of money on the offensive line to protect their quarterbacks, and it paid off. Maybe it took a little bit of time for the offensive lines to get put together and really gel, but both of those teams now don't sit there and worry about their offensive lines anymore. Patrick Mahomes plays, and he's virtually untouched, it feels like some games. And then you look at Joe Burrow and the Bengals. Yeah, that offensive line started off a little bit rocky during the beginning part of the season, but has gotten really good in this back half and is now going to be a prime reason for as to why this Bengals team isn't going to be winning playoff games 19-16, but they'll maybe be able to win 35-28 or something like that because they'll have the time to be able to protect Joe Burrow and he can continue to do what he's done best, and that is put that ball in receivers' hands. You want that same thing for Justin Fields. So focus on the offensive line of free agency, maybe pull in a pass rusher as well, or even if it's not an edge rusher, someone on the interior, someone who is going to fortify that defensive front, because you can never have too many good guys on your front seven. Look at a team like the Washington Commanders. They literally have like 5 first-round picks and a bunch of money loaded into that defensive front. Something like that will never hurt any football team. Now, focusing on the NFL draft portion of this, how do I want to see this team attack the draft? Well, you're looking at the number 1 pick in the draft altogether, and you're getting the first pick in every single round. If you are not completely sold on a specific player, and I'm talking you need to be sitting there thinking, we cannot move this franchise forward without bringing in this guy. Maybe Jalen Carter is that defensive lineman I was talking about. I don't know if that's necessarily the very first pick in the draft well spent. While I love Jalen Carter as a prospect coming from Georgia, and I think he would be a fantastic guy to stick right up front on that defensive line, I don't know if that's what you necessarily want to do with that very number 1 overall pick. There has got to be a team, because I'm assuming you're not going quarterback if you're Chicago here in this situation. I am assuming that there is going to be a team that wants to get a quarterback just as bad as the Houston Texans do right behind you at number 2. Someone is probably going to be willing to pay a king's ransom for someone like Bryce Young, Will Levis, whatever their cup of tea is at the quarterback position. If there is an offer on the table that's going to net you maybe multiple first-round picks or just a litany of draftable selections, like, you've got to listen. And I really think, especially if it ends up maybe putting you at like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, something like that, and you're still picking at the first round a couple of times instead of just once, take the offer. Get as much capital as you can and load this roster up. If you opt to not do so, for me, I would really like to see them take a premier pass rusher like I mentioned in free agency. I think that is going to be key for this team to be more successful. The Bears found themselves scoring a lot of points in some games this year, but their defense was letting up even more, so they were coming away with losses. I would really like to see them fortify the pass rush, use that first round selection. If you're not trading on the premier guy, maybe take Jalen Carter if you really think he is going to be a game changer for that front seven. But once you get that addressed, the other thing that I want to see the Bears go after is pick up either another marquee guy for wide receiver, or maybe go after that tight end that I was talking about earlier that would give you a really nice complement to Cole Kmet. The reason I'm not necessarily against them going after a tight end really highly in the draft is because, 1, there's going to be some solid tight end prospects, and 2, like I said, Cole Kmet, he's a good guy. I don't think he's necessarily a great guy when it comes to the tight end position, But if you were to pair Cole Kmet up with like a true receiving threat tight end, Kmet's solid at what he does. You get another guy. You can still deploy that wild, crazy run game that you have there already pretty much established in Chicago, but you can have a really big-bodied receiving threat alongside Cole Kmet, who's good at blocking, he's good at catching, he's good at doing a lot of things. And then you have, obviously, Darnell Mooney. You just re-signed Quinius St. Brown Jr. to an extension for another season to really see if, he can catch fire within this offensive system. I would be all for them going after a tight end and focusing more on those two tight end sets and running a heavier type of look for the offense because you have so much ability on the ground. The Bears were one of the most threatening rushing attacks in the league. So maybe double down on that and get yourself the top receiving tight end. That could maybe be a really big difference maker and another security blanket for Justin Fields. But if you're not going tight end, go for another wide receiver. Look for a guy who you can not pair up, but make like a trio with Darnell Mooney and Equanimeous St. Brown. Get yourself a legit trio. Look at some of the best teams in the league. The Chiefs don't necessarily have like the bona fide number one, but they have three really good guys that catch the football for them. You look at the Dolphins. They have a really good trio of wide receivers. The Cowboys have a really good trio of wide receivers. The Bengals, really good trio of wide receivers. If it's not like a star tight end and a couple of good receivers, it's a really strong trio with a good running game. And the Chicago Bears could be that offensively if they find themselves a true receiving threat, whether it's a receiver or a tight end. I think you could make it work either way because you have a very strong and sound running game already over there in Chicago. But those are kind of some of the things that I want to see the Chicago Bears go after in this year's draft and free agency, and what I really want to see them dial in on. This is my preview and kind of how I think that this Chicago Bears team should look at this offseason coming up. Obviously, a litany of other things to dive into. I'm not going to sit here all day breaking down the Bears. I am not an expert on the Bears, but I feel like I've dived in enough to kind of get a good idea as to what's going on in Chicago and where they should really be looking. My Bears fans, let me know what I'm right about, what I'm wrong about. What would you want to see the Chicago Bears doing this offseason? I would love to hear from you all specifically. I'll be doing this for every single team, all 32 as we roll through the offseason here, or into the end of the postseason and then into the offseason. I'll be previewing everybody. So we're starting with the teams already eliminated, and we'll go from there. But that's it for me. I appreciate you if you stuck around till the end. I will see you next time. Have a good one.